Okay, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. Today we've had a bit of an adventure trying to get our guest to arrive, but Vida is now here. Welcome, Vida.
Hi.
Hi. So Vida Cruz, she's a wonderful author, and you are coming to us from, am I right, the Philippines?
Yes.
Yes. So this is the magic of high technology, and perhaps the delay is a side effect of the distance and the free technology we are using, but it is good to have you on the show. I really appreciate you being here.
I'm happy to be here too.
So I had the pleasure of reading some of Vida's work before the show began, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of your most recent work.
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have any recent stories that you would like to start with, or is there a particular story that you'd like to start with?
I have, sorry, I was fiddling with the camera here. Okay, we could start with Odd and Ugly, that won first place in the Writers of the Future contest last year, 2017,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's a wonderful story.
Thank you.
Sure.
So,
tell me.
All right. So I retold Beauty and the Beast by setting it in Spanish colonial Philippines. And my beast is a capre, that's a tree giant here, a large, hairy, cigar-smoking tree giant. But it's not actually a tree. A lot of people get that mixed up. And my beauty is a farm girl who is running from the civil guard of her town. And this story is told from the beast's point of view in second person.
And there, I don't know how far we want to risk spoilers here. This is a really lovely story. So how about was this idea to retell Beauty and the Beast in this particular environment the initial thing that inspired the story to come together in the first place?
Well, actually, I've been thinking of the two characters in many different iterations over the years. And the Beauty and the Beast theme, that came last. And
Okay.
that's finally what got them to work. And around the time the trailer for the live action Beauty and the Beast came out, and that just things just clicked after that.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So is this period, the colonial Philippines, something that you studied in school or something that you researched yourself, or both?
Well, actually, everyone who ever studies in the Philippines will encounter this period because the Spanish were here for 300 plus years. But I realized that the education I got wasn't sufficient because, I mean, you're 9 years old, and what do I care about the taxation laws in that period? You know?
Yeah.
And so I got a little bit more when I was in college, but it wasn't until I attended Clarion in 2014, and I had one of the stories that I sent you, I wrote there, and after that, I ended up learning more about the colonial period because I had to do a lot of research for that story, and so I just ended up going down this rabbit hole, and I've been studying it ever since because there seems to be, in my opinion, there seems to be a dearth of literature on this period, good literature anyway.
Yeah.
So there. I'm sorry about that sound.
Well, that's okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about the capre?
Sorry, what?
the beast? Can you tell us a little about him, other than he's a large, hairy, cigar-smoking tree giant?
Okay. I'm trying not to spoil it, but
You know what? Okay, here's the thing. You're allowed to spoil it if you want to, because this is a show. We just have to warn people.
Okay. So my beast is actually he knew my beauty character from way before, but then the way I wrote it is you don't find out until midway, or at least gradually, what their connection is. And the way he views that character, he talks about her like he's really guilty, but he's also fascinated by her.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I wanted to show like somebody who's living a kind of bachelor life, but in a magical tree, so everything is a mess. And he has a lot of servants, but they can't really do work because they're flowers. They talk, but they can't do. He has this habit of like hoarding stuff from forests, stuff that people dropped in forests over like 300 years. And also, I wanted to put, because I had my friend Tade read this, well, the beta read, and he suggested that I flesh out the connection to world history a bit more, because I already established the beast as former runaway African slave, because because the Spanish also brought slaves to the Philippines at that period, and they built some of the walled cities here. But our literature doesn't talk about them a lot either. So I fleshed it out a bit more because I also heard that some of the origins of the Capre myth are the Spaniards told the natives because a lot of slaves are running away, that you shouldn't help them because they're actually large hairy beasts in trees who smoke cigars, and that's horribly racist. But I wanted to turn it around a little bit, and in the story, I hope I did.
Yeah, I think you did. It's a really interesting story. I hope you guys will go look for it. Interesting. Cool. And so there's another mythological creature implicated in there, but it was also appearing in the other story that you mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the other creature is called a diwata. I guess in the West you would call that a fairy. At least that's how it used to be told to me when I was little. But in my research, it seems more like a diwata is a mountain goddess. At least a woman who has a lot of powers, who roams mountains and lakes and stuff. So in the story, because Maria, the beauty character, her town is next to a mountain, and the Diwata has not been sighted for a long time. And when she comes to the beast, she keeps asking him questions like, "Where is the Diwata? And why isn't she helping us? Um, why isn't she helping us eject the Spaniards from our land, because they're also hurt in her land?" And the captain doesn't really have clear answers for her, because on some level he doesn't know, but on some level he does.
Yeah.
And if in our mythology I based this particular diwata on somebody called Maria Makiling. She's the diwata of Mount Makiling, which is in Laguna. It's outside of Manila. And it's fascinating about those mountains because when you're driving toward them, they look like a woman who's lying down. Yeah. And then So Maria Makiling is the protector of the mountains and the bay and all the animals in it. And there are lots of legends where she took mortal lovers, but they either had to go to war or they spurned her, stuff like that. It depends on the period. Because I
Mm.
know, because I know she took lovers during the Spanish colonial period, but also during World War II and also during our American period.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is obviously a really rich area. So, are you still researching it in an ongoing way?
Yeah, I am. Incidentally, I don't know how this happened, but there's been a resurgence of interest in Philippine mythology by Filipinos too. Because in the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, people have been publishing like books on collecting our creatures and
Mhm.
collecting our stories. And uh, recently too, that someone has been publishing like a zine that's been 4 volumes for now
Mhm.
called Spirit Archipelago, that's doing just that. And then recently also I used this website. It's called Aswang Project.
Mm-hmm.
I'll type that here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at it's a very comprehensive compendium of all our creatures, and it's still ongoing because it's really hard to collect um, stories about our mythology because we're an archipelago, and for some reason, our sorry about that. For some reason, our our ancestors didn't really write anything down. They're an oral culture, and
Mhm.
that goes for all the tribes.
Sure.
Yeah. So now I guess this period where we're at now, probably this is the second time that lots of people have tried to write down our oral heritage.
Mm.
It seems to me like that's a really rich vein to mine because, especially for Westerners, we have nearly no contact whatsoever with that entire body of knowledge.
Hmm. Yeah, I realized that. Also, to add to that, the Spaniards also tried to stamp out this kind of
Mm-hmm.
mythology. Because in some parts in the Philippines, actually, we still believe in like creatures are generally called aswang.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the provinces still believe that they exist. So
Mhm.
you'll see places with brooms crossed over windows or garlic hanging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but one of the things that the Spaniards tried to do was, and I found this one out like what last year. Uh, I'm a Tagalog, and we had a bunch of gods that they don't even teach us in school,
Mm-hmm.
and there are four who control areas of like death and dying. And what the Spaniards did was they took the names of these four and then they turned them into names for witches and other things that you can demonize because they were
Mm-hmm.
spreading Christianity in the Philippines. So I guess that's one other reason why we didn't really write anything down and why it hasn't really spread.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a fairly common story for colonized people. That's how you do it, by the book. And it's really cool that you're going in and saying, okay, I want to know what this is now. Um, and I'm hoping that there is enough of the original left. And there might be some space for you to sit down with someone who knows a lot about fairy tales and see how more attractive you can make it to a non-Filipino audience, because I think there's a lot of places that you could meet there. And I can't think of the name of the being, but there is an old woman that lives in the forest and she takes care of it. She lives in a little hut that's up on chicken legs. And
Oh
it
yeah,
sounds
that's
very
called
much
Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga,
yeah, Baba Yaga. And that sounds very much sort of like where you're headed with what was that called? Diwati?
Diwata.
Diwata.
The Diwata
Yeah.
in at least in the way that Vida portrays them in the story is a lot more sort of I get the feeling they're younger and more attractive.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, she can be, but she
Yes.
chooses not to most of the time.
That's true.
Yeah. So I mean, because we're humans and our brains all work the same way. So a lot of those things are congruent when we look across original like oral traditions. But I'd be really interested in knowing more, just in general, but also reading them as the background of a story.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Vida, if you would mind telling us a little bit about the mango story.
Yeah. Okay. This one was pretty difficult for me to write.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I wanted this one to be my first story at Clarion, but it ended up being my second story. I bought myself time by submitting something else that I cobbled together, and then it ended up being my second. It ended up being taken up on the second week. That's how difficult I found it to write. So this one, it's hard. It was harder for me to write because I set it in pre-colonial Philippines. So again, there's not much literature on that, though that's changing now. But at the time I was researching this in 2014, there still wasn't a lot to read, and I had to rely on Google searches. And honestly, the whatever you find on the internet isn't really enough.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have a mountain tribe that lives on some rice terraces. And my main character is, I wouldn't call her a slave because we actually had different kinds of servants in pre-colonial Philippines. So there's a servant who lives out, and there's a servant who's stuck in the house of the rich person.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the servant who lives out is allowed to have other servants, but it all runs in a debt system. So my main character there is the handmaiden of the heir to the tribe, and the tribe really values telling stories and singing, but this princess, she can't sing at all. And but the servant girl can. It's just that she can't be open about it because the princess's mother, the chiefess, she's jealous, and she would rather that her daughter inherited the ability to do this. And one day, the servant girl's brother, he's a warrior, he falls in love with the princess, and the servant girl does not like this because she thinks the princess is stupid and an airhead. But she helps her brother court her anyway. And then when he's trying to get the dowry boar, he I'm sorry, this is a spoiler, guys. When he's trying to hunt the dowry boar, he dies. The boar ends up killing him, and the servant girl finds him in the forest. And because she can sing so well, the diwata of that forest ends up hearing her and grants her one wish. She asks that her brother be brought back, but she really didn't specify how. So he's brought back as a mango tree, a spirit in a mango tree. And then the story actually branches out from there. I actually retold one of our myths of how the mango came to be. And when I read that story, it's basically there was a little boy who was very good, but then he dies, and the parents beg this diwata who comes by to bring him back. And what she does is she takes his heart and plants it in the ground and then upsprouts the first mango tree. It's also mixed with another myth where this girl wants to marry this guy, but her dad doesn't permit that. So she goes to a forest and takes her own life, and the father really regrets it. And again, a Diwata tells him, "You gotta plant her heart in the ground, and then up sprouts the first mango tree."
Mm.
And I'm assuming, I actually know this, but I'm assuming that the mango holds a fairly important part in the traditions and foodways of the Philippines, yes?
I guess it does, but there hasn't been a lot of literature on that. Isn't interestingly enough, because the heart is the organ that's most important in the West, right? And here too in the world. But in pre-colonial times, our most important organ was actually, I think it was the liver.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I mean, I had a push and pull about should I make it the heart or the liver, but it's kind of weird. So, okay, let's go with the heart because the mango looks like a heart anyway, or some people say that.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, you can get away with that either way because in the Western tradition, both like there's a bunch of internal organs you could use. I mean, people have used spleens and weirdness, whichever works for you. There are stories like the singing bone, and I don't even think they tell you what bone it is.
Okay.
You have a lot of options. There are a lot of body parts to choose from.
I know, right?
Do you guys have anything about like sort of spiritualizing or at least describing it in story and giving it personalization for like weather and storms and that sort of thing?
In the Visayas, I know their gods had something to do with the weather. One of the creation stories is this guy fights with this giant bird, and then it causes a lot of storms. But then the world is born from that fight.
Cool.
Yeah. I'll try to find a link and put it here.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making me want to go spend some time with my son's mother because she is from the Philippines.
Ah.
Yeah, and also like another family member will be coming over from the Philippines in April. So I'll sit down with Janet and ask her about this too. But yeah, this is great.
Cross-pollination of ideas. Yay.
Yeah. I noticed too the interesting about talking to Filipinos about their own mythology is that no one knows everything. So when you talk to different people, it's like putting the pieces of a puzzle together, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Have you written anything including ube yet?
No, but now that you mention it, I would like to.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Ube is a purple yam, and it's incredibly yummy. It's usually mixed with sugar, and they make these little like donut sort of things out of them, and they're incredibly wonderful.
It's also a great spread on bread.
Yes.
Really, yes.
Yeah. It's not, like you can't go from ube to Marmite. It's just not gonna work.
they're like two totally different genres of thing that just happen to be both bread on bread.
Yes. Yeah, and that would be a really interesting moment to explore in like either like the things we put on bread. Because it could be nearly anything.
Set that aside for a topic sometime.
Do a whole hour on things we put on bread.
We could do it too.
And the other thing is, have you done much with incorporating food?
Yeah, I've been trying. Oh, well, in both my the two stories that we talked about, I put food in there. I mean, they don't quite play a central part, but they're both there. Also, I mean, I think we have an equivalent in Greek mythology, but if the capra is courting a woman, gives her gifts of food, the woman has to be careful not to eat the food, especially something called black rice, because she'll be stuck in his realm forever.
Interesting. Black rice is a particular form of rice.
Yeah, I mean, that does exist here in the Philippines. There's like red, yellow, black, brown rice here, but I don't know why it's black rice in particular for capra.
I mean, whatever works, right?
Yeah.
There are all kinds of. I mean, it's. I think a common thread through mythologies in various parts of the world is that there are these very specifically identified foods that are either, you know, the right thing or the wrong thing to eat at any given point. So.
Okay.
So I actually wanted to ask you quickly about the realm of the capre. Is his realm just the tree in which he lives, or is it sort of an alternate reality kind of thing? Because there are aspects that seem to be consistent with either.
All the stories I've read, capra favors one tree, and then in more contemporary literature, there was this story where a capra favored one tree, but when you go inside, it's just one room of his house. And what I wanted to do was, when you go inside that tree, it's a completely different forest, but it's also ordered in a way that maybe only the capra and the Iwata understand.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Also, the talking flowers are my invention.
So that was your invention. Did it come from something specific? Was it like a crossover from Beauty and the Beast or some other story somehow, or was that something that you just thought was delightful? Because it was
both.
Delightful.
Thank you. It was both, actually. I mean, now that I realize it, it's consistent with the talking furniture from the Disney Beauty and the Beast. But on a craft level, I realized that the story will move forward much slower if we're just stuck with the Capre and Maria.
Oh yeah.
And I also wanted a snarky character, so here we have the fire tree, who is second in command in this story. And also, the flowers in a way mirror Filipino communities, because this doesn't happen all the time, but everybody knows each other and they're fond of gossiping and they have these petty little fights. And I kind of wanted that in the Clappers realm.
Sure. Yeah, they made me think a little bit of this is obviously not Beauty and the Beast, but they made me think a little bit of the flowers in Alice in Wonderland.
That makes sense.
Sorry?
I didn't make that connection before.
Yeah, well, that's okay. This is why, you know, a story is a little bit like a seed falling on the fertile ground of somebody's imagination. All right. Do we have other questions? Let's see. What are you working on now?
Well, so I recently got this year's Tiptree grant, and
congratulations.
Thank you. And the project I got it for was I made an alternate Philippine archipelago where people live side by side with our mythological creatures. and I'm telling it in the form of news articles. And then the journalist who is chronicling all this is also pretty opinionated. I mean, what journalist isn't? But they're pretty opinionated, and they're also determined to expose a lot of social issues like the rise of fascism in the Philippines, gender issues, I guess race issues, and historical revisionism, and because those are actually issues that are happening in the Philippines now.
Yeah.
And I have one story. One story has been published, and you can read it free online. I'll drop the link here. But um, I I have 5 plans so far, and second one has been um, the second one was bought by a local anthology. It's not out yet, and I'm really proud of the story that came out of that because I have Maria Makiling, the Diwata I mentioned a while ago. She opens a pop-up cafe on Restaurant Row, and the secret ingredient to why her food is so delicious is human heartbreak. And she
Human
has to,
heartbreak? Wow.
yes, and then she has to interview the people who want to give their heartbreak to her because they all want to be rid of it. But she only picks the ones who are really, really suffering. And she tends to pick people who were victims of martial law, which was instituted by Ferdinand Marcos in the 70s and 80s. And I picked that in particular because right now there's a resurgence of Marcos in politics, the Marcos family members, and they've been rewriting history and saying that everything we learned was fake, and that people who were tortured and all that, that's all it's not true.
Yeah.
Or they're just answering these accusations. And with the story, I wanted to say that we need to have compassion for each other, and just because this didn't happen to you doesn't mean that you shouldn't care about it.
Yeah.
There's also a strong strain though through that of I don't know if you guys do this, but some of my coworkers, like, I didn't like liver, and they made this thing called chocolate meat.
Whoa.
Which is a liver soup.
Wow.
And I hated, like, I hate liver, and they fed it to me anyway, and I was like, okay, you were the only people who could make me like liver. But it's that thing of the people who are oppressed making something beautiful out of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that that is pretty much our entire history. But
it kind of is.
Yeah. Although
I don't know that much of it, but yes, it is.
Although my one gripe with the Philippines is that because we're all focused on being happy and, live and let live, but that also means we have really short memories. It's only been 30 plus years since Marcos was ousted, and a lot of people are already forgetting the things that he did and pointing out the good things that he did. And that really scares me for like the senatorial elections in May.
Yeah.
And 2022 elections too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a cycle that's pretty well known. Like, right, we were lionizing Ronald Reagan 5 years ago. Now we're not doing it again. And that does happen. Then somebody like you will come along and go, no, this is the real thing. And I'm gonna bring that up again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it tends to be pretty uncomfortable for the person who does it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, really valuable, but uncomfortable.
Yeah. I also have another story. It's still in the works. This one, I'm kind of skewering the Duterte regime.
Ooh.
Yeah. So in this story, a civil war breaks out between the mythological creatures and the government, all because Duterte kissed Maria Marquiling without her consent, and she demanded an apology, and he gave a half-assed one, and then a lot of stuff just breaks out from there.
I want to read this.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, I hope I finish it in time. And I'm also working on another one. This one is for an anthology that my friend is putting together. Same world. I'm dealing with Typhoon Haiyan that hit us in 2013.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about climate change. The story follows a human girl who's 12, and then a mermaid who gets like marooned on shore because of the storm surges, and they're trying to survive this post-apocalyptic looking city right after Haiyan. But eventually, the mermaid has to go back to the sea because she can't survive too long on land. And we also go into a little tangent about how her family, because we've also got mermaid hierarchies here.
Because we have mermaid hierarchies. I mean, really.
Yeah. So this kind of mermaid, Katao, this is a Visayan thing. They control water and weather. And what I want to say is because we're suffering climate change and global warming, their powers are dwindling because the sea is getting polluted. They weren't able to stop Typhoon Haiyan or the storm surges.
I see.
That is such a cool idea.
Yeah,
I just
really
suddenly thought
wonderful idea.
kaiju versus mermaids.
Sorry, what was that?
I just had this weird thought: kaiju versus mermaids.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
Wow, it sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing things. Now, I don't know how much time you have, Vida, because I know we got a late start. So I don't want. Do you have to run off?
No, I don't. We can keep going.
I'm not sure how much more, how many more questions we have to ask you, but this has been super cool. And any of you have more things that you would like to discuss?
What other Southeast Asian or Philippine writers are you inspired by in your own fictional writing?
Dean and Nikki Alfar are a married couple in the Philippines, and they've been called the Oberon and Titania of speculative fiction in my country because actually spec fic, as we call it here, didn't really boom until the 2000s, and actually maybe this decade too. So since then, they've been publishing anthologies, collecting the best of every year, and I think that every speculative fiction writer who's grown up here owes them a debt.
Yeah.
Also, they're really good writers. I love Nikki's work in particular. It's very feminist, and they do fun stuff. Like one of her stories is this spy couple who have to dance ballroom together, but they're also trying to kill each other with every move.
Okay, not only do I want to read that, I would like to see the television adaptation.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Let's see here. I also like the work of my friend Victor Ocampo. He writes mostly sci-fi, and his first story collection, The Infinite Library and Other Stories, just came out from Mass Paper Press in Singapore, and really weaves together what I would say is hopes and dreams of many Filipinos and our realities with us being in space. And if you can get like the book, I highly recommend.
Can you put the name of it in the chat bar for us, please?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
And I am really interested in lots more stories about people who are not white guys in space.
Absolutely.
You know, because what's going to be the different relationships we have to our technology when we have other spirits to inform it? You know, we don't necessarily have to make Event Horizon 800 times. We can look at other people's traditions and you know, maybe you have sort of the spirit that lives in the station and is that
Yeah.
and interacting with the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also I feel like if we had an alien invasion and they landed in the Philippines, we would probably invite it to our houses and serve it lunch. We'll make them take off their shoes first at the door.
That would be definitely a first contact story no one's heard.
I want to hear it already.
It's sort of like the Toto, we're not in Manila anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's delightful. I actually really do want to see the alien invasion of Manila when they go to lunch. Fantastic.
We're perfectly suited for it because the Philippines is big on tourism, so we're kind of doing it all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to have it be something other than the stories we've had, which is, you know, it's always something of conquest. It's like, no, let's invite them in and have them have lunch, and then not have it be a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think on some level that is what we did when the Spaniards first came to the Philippines. I mean, you know, Magellan eventually died because, like, Lapu-Lapu's men killed him, but they managed to talk to different chieftains and even convert them to Christianity. So I'm also sure that if someone wrote an alien first contact story in the Philippines, we'll eventually go with the alien religion too.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to have to wrap it up here. Vida, thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry that our talk was maybe a little shorter than we'd hoped, but you were so patient. You were so patient getting in here, and I really appreciate it.
Earlier.
Please feel free to come back and visit us anytime, which is to say that if you would ever like to participate in a topic conversation, you're welcome. And if you ever would like to come back, if you have something new coming out, like, you know, for example, your story about aliens with lunch, you never know. If you have something new come out that you would like to talk about in depth, we would always love to hear about it. So feel free to come back on the show.
Thank you. And also, please let me know if you ever talk about the things you put on bread.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I will definitely invite you. That one. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the broadcast, but we will be able to chat further once the broadcast has been capped.
All right.
All right, thank you.